Evening East Jersey Tea Party 2015. Welcome. I'd like everybody to stand up, please. Bob's going to lead us in a prayer.
Oh God, we thank you for the wonderful holiday season we've just come through. Hopefully everybody having a good time and thinking about the last year, the new year, the event 2,000 years ago. We thank you for that. Thank you for getting us here through this terrible cold weather. We're surprised. I think that so many are here. We must have a good reason for being here. So God, let us express that reason very simply in just one request. We request, please, to inspire all the women and the men who have held your sacred word in one hand and raised their other hand in a pledge, vow, affirmation, that they would abide by the agreed upon Constitution of our country. And if I could add a second request, that there would be enough people who would work hard enough, long enough, to see that they do that. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you, Bob. Mayor, will you lead us in the pledge, please?
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. Thank you, Mayor. So, our first meeting for the year in this beautiful weather, 9 degrees, loving it. We are honored to have Mayor Steve Lonigan with us tonight, and he will have the majority of the meeting. But we're going to get through some housekeeping first. So if Steve would come up and give us the treasurer's report. Did I catch you eating, Steve?
Want to do that now too?
Yeah, I sent that agenda.
Okay, I get a couple of announcements then, I guess. So, not sure if you heard, but in 2014 we had 8,000 civilians that were killed in Afghanistan. That's not our military. 8,000 civilians. That made it almost as dangerous as living in Chicago. Not sure if you knew that. Last month, also, I don't know if you saw Prince William came over. Did you all see him? He was here not just to protest, he was actually here for a visit with the president. Decided to meet with Obama, had a couple minutes to spend with him. He was learning how to be king. I'm not sure if you caught that. He's just getting some advice. It's all right. So, before I do the treasurer's report, we have a movie night we're going to be planning for next month. Next month is actually Black History Month. So, unfortunately, most Americans don't realize that Black history started before Martin Luther King Jr. There were actually African American people here in this country doing things and contributing to our society and doing great things. So they don't know their history, we don't know that history, and I would like to present some of that to you next month. I have several posters if you can all make it. It's on a Wednesday night, February 25th at the Jackson Library. It'll be from 6 to 9 o'clock. If you want to bring some snacks, some water, coffee, whatever, it's open to bring all that in there. We're going to socialize a little bit. take some friends out, introduce them. We're going to go through this movie, and then we'll have a little discussion about what we just saw and you know, how that affects where we are today. So anyway, that's Wednesday, February 25th. I have some posters. If you want to take one, hand them out, spread them around to some of your friends, and that'll be from 6 to 9 p.m. at the Jackson Library. And now for our treasurer's report. For this current date, we have $643.16 in the treasury. And that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. If you all remember, Steve last year was going to try to do the Black History Month, but we had the snowstorm. Let's pray that we don't have it this year, because I, for one, intend to be there. So thanks again, Steve. Jen, you want to take a minute for us? Great. Thank you. Okay. We're going to kind of fly through everything because I know Steve Mailonica needs a lot of time tonight. So Jason, will you come on up, please?
All right, what a lot of you have seen on your tables, I put a list of so far the planned or intend to plan events for 2015. Anybody that doesn't, I'll walk around with more and drop them off. Some of the more upcoming ones are the Center for Self-Governance Class Level 1 that Ted spoke to us about, I believe it was last month. And following that, that was on the 24th, and following that is a Level 2 class. Just a note, to take the Level 2 class, you already have to be certified or already taken the Level 1. So, as I was told, you cannot take the January 24th and then take the 25th right after that. You will need homework for the Level 1. So, unfortunately, you have to wait for the next round of Level 2 classes to come around. Just another brief notes. The Lincoln Day dinner brought to you by the Monmouth County Republicans. So you can go on their website for more details. The St. Patrick's Day Parade in Belmar in March, like we've done every year. Unfortunately, this year it's going to be a little bit earlier. It's probably going to be a lot more cold on the 1st of March. So wear your long underwear, wear whatever you need to do. But it's always a fun time for anybody that's come there and marched with us. They can always attest to that. It's cold, but it's a real great time. Patriots Day, which is something that I believe Dan might have touched on a little bit last month. We're going to be bringing more information in the coming months. It's going to be a real fun time. It's going to be an all-day event from 8 a.m. to dusk in Huddy Park and Toms River. So we're going to be having stands and exhibitions from some other clubs, such as Second Amendment clubs with demonstrations. We're going to be doing some stuff with the Boy Scouts and fundraising, so keep an eye out for more information on that in the next month or two. As well as we're having two Blue Claws games this year. Anybody that's come out for those knows those are always a good time, and unfortunately, due to scheduling and just general time management, we've only had one per year. So this year I'm going to plan 2 of them and get information to you in the next few months with sign-ups and pricing and so on and so forth. Anybody have any questions on anything?
What's the date for Patriots Day? You know?
Patriots Day is the 18th of April. That is a Saturday. Again, that's going to be 8 a.m. to dusk. And again, I'll pass these around. Just have all the information. These do not have Steve's movie night on here. So if you are interested in movie night, please hold on to his flyer for sure as well, in addition to this. And any questions, I'll be here at the meeting. Just feel free to have an ask. Thank you. Also, I do have more shirts for sale if anybody's still interested. Thanks.
Thanks, Jason. So we have a few new people here tonight. Richard, which is a guest of Bob's. Denise brought a guest. Denise, you want to just tell us who your guest is? Who brought a guest from Florida? I love this. So Denise, introduce your guest, please.
I'd like to introduce Joe Brown and his friend from Florida.
Matt from Florida. Matt's first time ever being at a Tea Party meeting, so let's make sure he goes back with rave reviews. Okay. It truly is my honor. Again, I'm sorry we're rushing this, but Mr. Lonigan had I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, Joan has a guest. I'm sorry, Joan, go ahead.
My friend Linda Bernardi.
Linda, hello Linda, and I love Linda's t-shirt. This is great. We love having new members or new people come in and see what the Tea Party is all about. But it is truly my honor to be able to have Mayor Lonigan come in. Sue Ann called me about 3 months ago even. 3 months ago to say Steve would like to come and talk about the dollar. And I jumped on it. I said, absolutely. We could never say no to Mr. Lonigan. So Joe wants to introduce Sue Ann. Where's Joe? There you go. Joe.
I've heard Steve speak several times, and I was always impressed. You can't help but be impressed with the storehouse of knowledge, the principles which we stand for, and the different at the different meetings. And I believe at least one of them was at the Cross Point Church, if I have that right. And that's a classic speech for me on the economy and how to improve it. So it's my privilege to have Steve here as well. And we have Sue Ann Penna will do all of the introductions here.
Thank you so much. It's nice to be here with you all tonight. I'm Sue Ann Penna. I'm the National Field Director for American Principles' new project, which is Fix the Dollar. And Steve Lonigan is the Director of Monetary Policy. And before he does come up to speak, we're going to play about a 3-minute video for you from our kickoff event with Steve Forbes. Thank you.
You can get it right on taxes, you can get it right on regulation, you can get it right on government spending. But if you don't get the money right, it's all for naught.
The American dream is fading into myth as the prosperity of the American worker is being crushed in the vice of stagnant wages and the rising cost of living. All because of central planners at the Federal Reserve System that attempt to control the value of our money. It's time Americans took back the American dollar. It's time to fix the dollar.
Trading. If we don't trade with one another, do transactions with each other, we don't get a higher standard of living. We'd still be living in caves.
We know in our hearts, Americans know right now that there's a problem. They know there's a problem with this country. We're watching the American dream slip away. We've become accustomed to interest rates that are so low that an American who's worked hard and saved all their lives can't get a return on their income. We're accustomed to mediocre, high unemployment rates, kids coming out of college and living in their families' homes. That's the new norm. But that's not the American dream.
In the 40 years that we have been off a gold standard, our average growth rate is less than it was the previous 180 years that we're on a gold standard. If we had maintained gold standard growth rates, you realize the American economy today would be 50% larger than it is now? Ponder that. $8 trillion bigger. Life would be a lot better.
President Obama says the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. He blames capitalism. The rich are getting richer, and the middle class is getting squeezed. And the quality of life that many of us in this room have been accustomed to is diminishing. Not because of free market capitalism, but because of the failed policies of the Federal Reserve Bank that is debasing the American dollar, the very cornerstone of our economy. We have a Federal Reserve Bank that prints money out of thin air, out of nowhere.
When people stop trusting money, they stop trusting each other. It undermines social cohesion, undermines the moral order. Lenin was right. Not 1 in a million will understand it when you debauch the currency. Locke was right. He said when government arbitrarily changes to the value of money, it cheats people who have entered private contracts with each other. Some may get a gain, some may get a loss, but only everyone loses. You saw it in the housing bubble, which we never would have had if the dollar hadn't been undermined.
Without control of your savings, you don't control your liberty. Without control of your money, you don't control the value of your wages and your labor. With giving control of our money to bureaucrats, we give up control of our economy and our destiny. We have the obligation, the ability, and the moral responsibility to maintain sound money that the world can trust. As Emma Largess's great poem on the Statue of Liberty states, let us lift our torch beside the golden door. Let's make American money once again as good as gold. Join this great effort at American Principles in Action as we fix the dollar. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for having me. It's always a great pleasure to be with this group over the years. Very, very pleasure. In watching that video, you saw behind me at the end that great gift from France, the Statue of Liberty standing behind me. This is only not far from the site of the World Trade Center attack. That word liberty has become up quite a bit lately. I don't normally like to start out a presentation like this, but yesterday we saw 11 great heroes of liberty die for our beliefs right across the sea in that great country who donated that statue. Knowing the threat that they were under in exercising their freedom of speech, I don't know if you heard the interview with the editor who was killed yesterday, who said he'd rather be dead than to forfeit his freedom of speech. I think to these great heroes of liberty, we owe a Tea Party moment of silence, so I hope you'll join me in that. I can only hope we have leaders in this country who are willing to be as brave. So listen, how do you come off of something like that and re-energize the crowd? Because I take great energy from knowing that there are people around the world who believe in what we in the Tea Party believe in, liberty. And during that video tonight with our kickoff with Steve Forbes, which we did in downtown Manhattan in August of our Fix the Dollar project, so I'm here tonight to talk about something you're very familiar with, this little piece of paper in my hand. This little piece of paper that we use every day to do business with each other, to transfer assets with each other. This little piece of paper that allows me to go down the street to somebody I don't even like and do business with them on an equal basis. That allows me to go into the Starbucks and pay way too much money for a latte and be happy to do it. Or allows me to go into my tax collector and pay way too much taxes, which I'm not that happy to do. Folks, in his opening statement, you may have heard Steve Forbes say, Lenin was right. Comrade Lenin was right. You can debase the currency and not 1 in a million will know it. And that's what Comrade Lenin did after the Russian Revolution. In order to destroy the middle and upper income classes of the Soviet Union, he destroyed the value of the ruble. So when he destroyed the value of the ruble by simply printing rubles out of thin air, people who had rubles in the bank found them worth nothing. Put that in the back of your head for a moment. The Federal Reserve System in this country is the most powerful economic driving entity in the world. Not elected by you, not elected by me, and not elected or accountable to anyone, except the United States Senate, possibly, if they wish to be accountable, and the president. And that's who determined what this piece of paper is. And that's what I'm going to talk about with you tonight. We're watching the stock market doing very, very well. We're hearing about an economic recovery. But what's the real truth? Well, the real truth is that over the last 7 years, the rich are becoming richer, much richer. The so-called recovery that we're experiencing, 95% of that recovery is benefiting over less than 5% of the population, the real growth of wealth. The middle class is getting squeezed, the poor are staying poor. According to our own federal government statistics released in September, the average income wage earner in this country as of the end of the last year saw a 7% drop in their wages over the last 7 years. A 7% drop in the buying power of their income. Well, how could that be if we have all this great economic growth? What happened to the golden age of the middle class? I mean, I was a kid growing up in the 60s, and I seem to remember in the late 50s, the 60s, and even into the early 70s, that as my dad worked, things seemed to get better. You know, every few years, we seemed to be able to buy a little bit more, go on a little more vacation. That was the golden age of the middle class. Between the end of World War II in 1945 and 1971, the average wages of the middle income wage earner in this country went up 85% in buying power. In other words, their incomes went up enough to increase their buying power, adjusted for inflation, by 85%. So did the wealthy class. They saw an 85% increase in their wealth and buying power. And so did the poor. Poor people in this country from 1945 to 1971 were elevated out of poverty into the middle class, and this is the stepping stones of America. They saw their incomes and their ability to purchase through working hard and savings increase 85%. Since 1971, it's a downhill slide. It's been a downhill slide. We've seen middle income wages remain stagnant. You see it in those government statistics since 2007. And by the way, that was happening before then too. But you've seen the wealthy getting much wealthier. So when Obama says the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, he happens to be right. But Obama blames free market capitalism. And so do those protesters in Ferguson in New York City a couple of weeks ago, laying down the Apple stores and the Macy's stores, blaming capitalism for their plight of being poor. But I'm going to prove to you tonight, folks, and this is extremely critical to us in the Tea Party movement and the defenders of liberty. It is not free market capitalism that's widening the income gap. It is the failed policies of the Federal Reserve Bank, who are printing money out of thin air and debasing the American dollar, and not one man in a million knows it. I've been involved, folks, as you know, many of you know, in economic and political policy for a long time. As a mayor, as the state director of American Prosperity, you may remember my 7 years of Taxpayer Minute radio commentaries on key economic issues. One thing that I began to realize over the last several years is how critical what the Federal Bank is doing to our money. Because we don't control our money today, folks, they do. That piece of paper in your pocket that you take for granted, that used to be yours, is now controlled by others. Not one man in a million would know it. I can point to you the exact day that the American dream, what is the American dream? The American dream is this idea that every generation is going to do better than the next, right? Isn't that the American, where you're going to do better, you're going to work hard, you're going to save through working hard and savings and through thrift. You'll do better, and then your next generation will do better, and the next year. How many polls do you see now, constantly, year after year, that our generation believes that the next generation is not going to have it as good as we have it? We're hearing this all the time. The younger generations know it too. It's true. We've allowed this to happen, not just because of a massive $18 trillion national debt, rules and regulations that have shown the economy, but the single most important thing, the destruction of the American dollar. And I'll point to you the exact moment in time when the American dream began to die. And that day was August 15th, 1971, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, when a president named Richard Nixon ended the gold standard, the United States of America, claiming that America was under attack. You see, the president at that time had a problem. 1964, Lyndon Johnson had elevated his Great Society, massive government spendings after the growth of Franklin Roosevelt. Under Johnson, Johnson said he was going to have a war on poverty. And he was going to stamp out poverty with the Great Society. It was going to be government-funded housing, after-school programs, expanded welfare programs, daycare programs. This was the Great Society. That would cost a fortune. Add to that the massive programs of Medicare and Medicaid. 1964. By 1971, those costs of those programs were skyrocketing well beyond predictions even then. Nixon had another problem, a war in Vietnam. And the choice would normally be what we would call guns or butter. Nixon wanted both. 1971 was a year before an election year. He had a choice. Either raise taxes to fund the expanded programs of the Great Society in the Vietnam War, or print money. Well, this was Nixon's response.
this
I have
famous...
directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets.
In that 4-minute speech, you can see the whole speech on our website at Fix the Dollar, the President directed Secretary of the Treasury to temporarily suspend the convertibility of gold, gold backing the American dollar, your ability to go into a bank and say, I'd like to redeem this piece of paper in my pocket for real value. Temporarily was 44 years ago. Well, listen, that was Nixon's decision. Up until that point in American history, for 190 years, just about 200 years, we had had a gold standard in this country. That meant when you walked into the bank with your $20 gold certificate, you could say, Mr. Banker, well, up till 1933, it was $20 got you an ounce of gold. You could walk into the bank and you could say, Mr. Banker, I'm really not happy with the stability of this $20 so-called piece of paper. I'd like my $20 gold piece, and you would get your $20 gold, 1 ounce gold piece. That number was raised to $33 later. Nixon ended any convertibility of currency to gold. And we've seen the consequences. Of course, we know what that resulted in. It was only about 3 years later that Nixon made this speech. Nixon made this speech.
Therefore, I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow.
Richard Nixon resigned as President of the United States because no one could trust him. Democrats wouldn't trust him. Republicans wouldn't trust him. He had lost the trust of America. But we've trusted Richard Nixon with the single most decision about our money in the history of America. We've trusted him with that decision. A temporary decision 43 years later. What is money? What is this little piece of paper in our pocket? Well, Americans used to take it very, very seriously. The founding fathers of this country took it very seriously. They had dealt with printed paper money back during the Revolution. They had turned their British pound sterling in for printed paper money called Continentals. These Continentals would become worthless. They would be backed by nothing. George Washington was famous for saying he needed a carload of Continentals for a carload of supplies. The founders, Thomas Jefferson, John James Madison, every single one of them hated paper money. If they knew that we were running our country on this printed piece of paper today, they'd be rolling over in their graves. No, they'd be jumping up calling for a new revolution. They hated it so much they could put a clause in the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, that states that only Congress has the right to coin money and determine its value. Only Congress. Congress has abdicated that responsibility to an unelected organization called the Federal Reserve System. Jefferson learned the hard way. Jefferson, the short story is Jefferson had loaned, when he was handling an estate, executing an estate, he had to loan money out that was in British pound sterling, but he had converted it to, he had loaned out millions in British pound sterling. A British pound sterling, by the way, is a pound of silver. That's a British pound sterling. That's what it traditionally is. He loaned it out in British pound sterling, but after the Revolution got paid back in Continentals. The problem is the Continentals weren't worth anything. So he lost a fortune he would never recover from that. And many of the founders had similar traits. During the Constitutional Convention, Thomas Paine wrote an essay in which he said, and this was not a joke, any politician who supports the printing of money should be impeached and executed. So they meant business. They knew what paper money meant. So we have a constitutional clause that the Congress has avoided. Now, they didn't stop there. Alexander Hamilton, Secretary of the Treasury, him and Jefferson and Aaron Burr agreed on one thing. They hated paper money. They passed the Coinage Act in 1970, which established just how they would create the American coin. At the top of these pictures here, this is the top coin is the 1 ounce gold piece. You can still buy them today. It's a Liberty coin. They actually still mint these coins in the United States Mint. Gold coins called Lady Liberties. They then had half gold coins, quarter ounce gold coins, 1/10 of an ounce gold coins. And then you had your silver dollars. You had your silver dollar, which was 90% silver, your silver half dollar, your silver quarter dollar, your silver dimes, your silver nickels,
And then that went down to copper pennies and copper 1/10 of a penny. These were determined by Congress to be our coinage. They had real value. But as time went on, they very quickly realized, look, you can't walk around with these big heavy coins in your pocket. They don't make a lot of sense. So they created something called a United States Treasury note. I want you to see what an American dollar looked like up until 1971. They used to be called United States Treasury notes. They were a note of the United States government. On the United States Treasury note, it would say, redeem for $1. Isn't that redundant? No, it's not. Because the note itself was not the dollar. The dollar was the silver coin. That if you held that $1 United States Treasury note, you might remember as young folks having silver certificates, I still have of them. They were $20 gold certificates, that you could walk into the bank and you could say, Mr. Banker, I want to redeem my United States Treasury note for my $1 silver piece, which will be 90% silver. I'm not confident in this piece of paper. I want to make sure that I take the value of my life's work, the value of my savings, the value of my being, and I want to be able to take it anywhere in the world and you can't take it from me. It'll be my value. You can't have it. If I want to bury it under the bed, it'll be my silver coin. Today, if you look at the piece of paper in your pocket, it is now called the Federal Reserve note. It's no longer called the U.S. Treasury note. This has sort of evolved over the last several years. But if you're a lawyer, any lawyer will tell you, what is a note? A note requires a date certain to be redeemed, a redeemable value, and a bearer and a payee. In the case of the United States Treasury note, that U.S. Treasury note, the payee was the government, the payer was the government, the payee was the bearer of the note. The date certain is when you walked into the bank and said, I'd like to get my silver dollar for my paper note. This is no longer a note, folks. This is a lie. You see, the Federal Reserve System is not federal. It's a private banking system. The president appoints the governors and the chairman, the Senate ratifies it, it stops there. There are 12 Federal Reserve banks around the country. They're private institutions. This is their note. And it's not a note because you can't redeem it for anything. If you walked into the bank back in the old days with your $20 pay, you said, I'd like my ounce of gold, I'm not happy with the way the world is, you got your ounce of gold. If you walked in today and said, Mr. Banker, I got my $20 bill here, I want to redeem it for, can I have that fair share of that subprime mortgage you have in that vault in the back of your bank? It will be redeemed for nothing. The piece of paper in your hand, and they'll tell you so astutely, oh, this money it's based by the full faith and backing of the United States of America. What does that mean? It means it's backed by what we hope the rest of the world believes it's worth. America's having a good year this year, but middle-income wage earners are being squeezed in a rising cost of living, in stagnant wages. Cost of living going up 4 or 5%, and average wages going up 2%. Seems to me the middle class is losing ground every week. That should be the formal full battle of the Tea Party movement, to take back control of our money. One of the first acts of Congress 2 days ago, after the unfortunate re-election of Speaker of the House John Boehner, was the reintroduction of H.R. 24, which is the House bill to require an audit of the Federal Reserve System. Last time in September was backed by 337 congressmen. That meant it took 95 Democrats and was held up by Harry Reid in the House. That bill will move through the House into the President's desk. That bill will require that the Federal Reserve System explain how and why they decide to print money out of nowhere, because that's exactly what they do. What do I mean when I say they print money out of nowhere? That's exactly, well, here's how they do it. Here's how they create money. Let's just say you're a big bank. Maybe you're the Bank of America, you're Chase Manhattan Bank, and you've got yourself a whole bunch of mortgages, or any of these banks out there, you put all your mortgage, and you've issued a whole bunch of mortgages. Maybe you have $1 billion in mortgages at Bank of America, or $100 million at a lesser bank. You say, you know what? We're financing these mortgages. We'd like to get the money that we loan back in one lump sum, and we can loan that out again to people and get more mortgages, but we're all tied up. So the Fed says, we'll buy those mortgages. So the Fed says, okay, Bank of America or Chase Manhattan Bank or TD Bank, we'll buy your mortgage portfolio. Here's $1 billion. And you give us the mortgages. A staffer pushes a button. $1 billion is transferred to the Bank of America's bank account that never existed before. It simply never existed. Folks, when they talk about printing money out of thin air, we don't have the benefit of them printing money. It's all digital. It's all it is now there's $1 billion more cash that never existed. There's something we learn about as young people, and you don't have to go to college to know what it means, supply and demand. The more of the supply, the less the demand. The more money that's printed, the less value it becomes. Between 1913, when the Federal Reserve System was established, and the Federal Reserve System was established to monitor and to run the country's money supply and to control the gold standard, which it did until 1971. Between 1913 and August of 2007, when Lehman Brothers collapsed, the Federal Reserve had acquired $900 billion in such securities. Mortgage-backed securities, and the other thing they buy is United States Treasury notes. So if the United States government says, look, we're going to sell a whole bunch of Treasury notes, we need money to fund big government, the Fed says, we'll buy them, voila, money comes out of nowhere. Suddenly the Fed has Treasury notes in their balance sheet, and the federal government has an entry in their bank account of money that had never existed before. Between 1913 and 2007, the Federal Reserve balance sheet grew to $900 billion. It took 93 years from the inception of the Federal Reserve to accumulate $900 billion into such assets. In the 90 days following the collapse of Lehman Brothers, when Ben Bernanke and team told Congress we're going to have to bail out all these big banks, the Federal Reserve balance sheet grew to $2.3 trillion in 90 days. More than 150% growth in new printed money in 90 days. Today, as we stand here today, that balance sheet has reached $4.3 trillion in newly printed money. No wonder there's a massive amount of capital on Wall Street for big corporations to buy other companies, to buy back stocks, to buy overseas companies, not to build plant and equipment to create jobs for the middle class, but to grow the portfolios of the very wealthy and the Wall Street wealthy. Hey, my portfolio is benefiting, but it's not healthy for America. It's not healthy for America. You know, there's a time, folks, that Americans understood very, very well the importance of their money. They would have died for this. Only 100 years ago. The elections of 1896, William McKinley versus William Jennings Bryan, was all about William Jennings Bryan actually having the audacity to want to have a silver standard. And people said, wait a minute, how can you dilute our currency by diluting gold? That election of 1896, 1900, 1904, in fact, Americans were so in tune to this issue that one of the most famous stories, fables, movies, plays in American history was all about the gold standard. It was a 1900 story written by a man named Frank J. Baum called The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. The Wonderful Wizard of Oz is a political metaphor on the 1896 election of William McKinley. The Wonderful Wizard of Ounce. The yellow brick road representing the gold standard. Oz, the city, representing Washington, D.C. The wizard was the President of the United States. Dorothy herself represented the average American. Her slippers in the original book are silver, representing silver as money, not red. And the scarecrow, well, the scarecrow represented Midwestern farmers who wanted to expand the money supply to create inflation to get more money for their crops. The Tin Man represented the rusting industrial workers, and the lion, the courageous lion or cowardly lion represented William Jennings Bryan, who the author felt bark was worth it his bite. There were many other metaphors. All the flying monkeys represented Wall Street analysts and stuff like that. This drove 3 elections in a row. Americans were adamant about this. They would never allow what's happened to our dollar. We are letting our understanding of our heritage, the value of our money, slip between our fingers. It is the single biggest threat to the future of our liberty in this country. On November 14th, Federal Reserve Chairwoman Janet Yellen met with 30 representatives behind closed doors, 30 representatives of left-wing liberal former Acorn affiliate groups. 30 representatives from around the country of groups like the Pennsylvania Working Families Party, the Brooklyn Center for Popular Democracy, and others, all admittedly left-wing liberal groups who boldly said they want a seat at the table to influence monetary policy. We're away. We're away. Comrade Lenin said, you can debase the dollar and not one man in a million will know it. The left understands that. They met with Janet Yellen. Nobody knows what took place at that meeting. I have personally called for a meeting with us, with 30 representatives of conservative and center-right groups who also want to understand monetary policy. Shockingly enough, she has yet to agree to that meeting. Folks, paper money. Oh, wait, let me go one more thing. Richard Nixon, that little 4-minute speech, you got to love this. Sue-Ann?
Your dollar will be worth just as much tomorrow as it is today.
That was 1971. Just as much tomorrow as it is today. That was his promise. The dollar is worth 10 cents of what it was in 1971. 10 cents. You know, if I was to have a 1960 silver dollar in front of you right now, and I'm sorry, I usually bring one. 1960 silver dollar, which was 90% gold, today is worth $15. In 1960, you could take your silver dollar and you go out and buy 3 gallons of gas. If you had your silver dollar today, how much gas could you buy? 6, 5, based on the market prices today. In other words, your buying power would have increased, your value would have maintained itself. But if you take your $1 silver dollar today, your dollar bill from 1960, you can buy half a gallon of gas. If you go to the bank tomorrow and you ask them for, I'd like to have one of these, I want to redeem this for a silver dollar, they'll say, sure, here you go. And you're going to get a shiny gold thing that's made of magnesium that isn't worth anything. So if you place the silver dollar in a drawer in 1960 next to a paper dollar, your 1960 silver dollar has maintained and improved its value. Your paper dollar's melted. Americans, founders understood this. Americans not very long ago understood this, and around the world in the history of mankind, printed paper money has never, ever worked and has always failed. You may remember last year a little race I ran against this guy, Cory Booker. You might have heard of him. That was an exhausting race. When the race was over, I went home and I just wanted to unwind. I'm just going to read any book. So this is pure coincidence. I pull a book off the shelf. It happens to be A Tale of Two Cities by a guy named Charles Dickens. And if you read the book, and I ask you to do this, he opens up about the terror of the French Revolution, the guillotines, and the thousand. In the 4th chapter, Dickens, in one single sentence, explains what caused the French Revolution. He writes, the French government had engaged in the printing of money and spending it, and in so debasing the famous French franc, destroying the middle class and causing a middle class and lower class uprising that took out the aristocracy that was benefiting from that printed money. That's truth, folks. That's history. Thomas Jefferson wrote extensively about this. He understood it very well. But it doesn't end there. This picture here, I think, is Hungary, 1948. Hungarians who had worked hard. These are real Hungarians, not peasants. These are middle-class people. They're shoving their money into the sewers. Because printed Hungarian money had engaged in printing money, they had lost their life savings. Here they're using it, burning it to heat food, was worth more as fuel than as printed paper money. And as recently as Zimbabwe, in the last decade, we saw Zimbabwe, which actually had a powerful growing economy in the 1980s, resulted in printing money. And I used to walk around my $1 trillion Zimbabwe note. Printed money destroyed that country. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not here to predict catastrophe. I happen to think we're going to have a good year the next year. What's winning out in America is innovation, human capital, and our drive and our liberty that we still have, that will grow the economy ultimately. But we are at great risk of having that savings that you have in your bank account being taken right out from under you. You know, if you worked hard and you saved all your life, because you know, not all of us get to become successful rappers or football players or movie stars. The vast amount of Americans who build wealth do it the old-fashioned way. They work hard, they save, they accumulate. And the model of capitalism is you save your money, And as you build capital, you invest that capital in the means of production. Maybe you start a business. Maybe you buy real estate. Maybe you loan that to a family member to start a business. Or maybe you go down to the bank and say, Mr. Banker, can you lend this for me? I've worked all my life and I want to get a fair rate of return on my interest. If you've worked your tail off all your life, and you've done it the old-fashioned way, and you're 70 or you're 80, and you've got $1 million in the bank. You know, $1 million is still an iconic amount of money. I remember a kid in the 60s, if you were a millionaire, they had that show, remember The Millionaire? The guy would hand you $1 million and you had it made. Walk into the bank tomorrow. Say, Mr. Banker, I've worked hard and saved for 45 years. I saved my dimes and nickels, I sacrificed, I have $1 million. It's my time to be free, help my kids. Well, guess what? Your interest rate on a 90-day Treasury note is $200 for 90 days, $800 for the year, and the bank will pay you, if you're lucky, 1%. That's $10,000 before taxes on your life savings. They have rendered savers to obsolescence. They don't need your savings. They don't need your savings. They need the value of your effort because they can just print it out of nowhere. Why should they pay you for your wife's effort if they can throw money out of nowhere? Do you see what they're doing? They're destroying the American dream. They're destroying the American dream. Working hard and they've made a mockery of thrift. And they've made an eccentricity out of frugality. It's time for us as Americans to demand that we return to the gold standard on which this nation stood so prosperously for 190 years. Money that we can believe in, money that can be sound for future generations. If anything, when times are good, that's the time to make that change. And it can and it will happen. I intend to make this a key issue in the upcoming presidential elections. I don't want these candidates for president to avoid the 800-pound gorilla in the room that's talking about the Federal Reserve System. So I hope you'll join me in this effort, folks. That's really why I'm here. I'm heading down to Iowa in the next month, South Carolina tomorrow, and New Hampshire for a reason. We're going to make this an issue in those states. So thank you for having me, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Any
Steve, I have
questions?
a question.
Yes.
What do you say to people that say it's all relative? The dollar's only worth 10 cents today versus 1949. What is your answer to someone saying, well, everything is up 10 times?
An ounce of gold is over $1,200 today. It was $33 in 1949. So if you took your ounce of gold in 1949 and put it under your bed, you'd have $1,200 today. If you put your dollar bill and put it under your bed with interest at 4%, you'd have roughly $25 today. So yeah, it's relative. But here's the thing. When you have money backed by gold, nobody can take it from you. See, if you look at the news, like you probably know as well, there's always these stories about the Federal Reserve Chairman's going to make a speech. And it's really important, and the whole world watches, and markets go up or down. If you go back to pre-1971, no one knew who the Federal Reserve Chairman was, and nobody cared. Because it didn't matter. Because our money was ours, period. So.
Marilyn? Mr. Lockett, you mentioned that you're going to make, I guess, the purpose of your life to get the gold standard reimbursed within the United States.
Yep.
Now tell me, is there enough gold in the United States to back our currency?
Yes,
Or
there is.
it-
Yes.
where is
See, this is that. Thank you, Marilyn, for that's a really, really good question.
I
The
think
gold
you said-
standard. The gold. The gold standard does not require that you have a matching amount of gold for currency. The Bank of England, which managed the British gold standard, which, by the way, the gold standard was designed by a guy you might have heard in 1700 named Isaac Newton. Isaac Newton built his gold standard for the Bank of England plan off of the writings of a guy named Copernicus. It was reinforced by Adam Smith. Let's see, so we got guys like Copernicus, Isaac Newton, Adam Smith, Thomas Jefferson. They can't all be wrong, can they? I don't know, maybe. I don't think so. But anyway, when Great Britain ran their over 250 years, their reserve of gold to currency ranged from 4 to 40%. They never had a 100% ratio. We never had a 100% ratio of gold to currency. In fact, between the Revolution and 1896, no, sorry, in the first 125 years, so from the Revolution around 1910, The American currency volume increased 167 times, or gold supplies increased 3 times. So gold is a measuring stick. It establishes the value of your money. It doesn't mean you have to have all that much gold in reserve. You don't. What happens is if people start coming in and saying we want to redeem our money for gold, the government needs to go out and get more gold. What happens is they mine more gold, they acquire more gold to back their money. That's how the system has always worked. So that's one of the misconceptions that people say. And the answer is right now we're the largest holder of gold in the world. Largest holder of gold. We have enough to establish a gold standard according to many of the experts, from Steve Forbes to Larry White, many, many others. And we have the ability to acquire more gold. However, you might want to pay attention to this. China is moving very, very aggressively to grow their gold supply. Right now, it's the United States, followed by Germany, followed by Switzerland, followed by Italy, followed by France. No, followed by China. China is working very aggressively to increase their gold standard because they want to back their money with gold. Russia is moving aggressively to increase their gold supply as well. So.
Are they still doing that with the price of oil dropping the way it has?
Yes. Yeah, it's still a matter of backing up their current. Whether they have the ability to acquire gold is another thing, but they are moving aggressively to do it. Yeah. Yes.
Dan?
Yes, Mr. Lonergan. If we return to the gold standard, what would happen to the value of the dollar?
Well, here's how it would work. The next president gets elected, and if he's the right guy, he'll say, in my ideal world, right? My Wizard of Oz kind of world, he'll get up and put his hand on the Bible, make his speech, and announce that at a date certain, 15 months later or 18 months later, let's just say he'll say that on, I don't know, February 8th, 2018, America is going to peg its money to gold. The world, the entire world, then has 15 months to adjust the value of an ounce of gold. Plenty of time for an entire world market. Nobody can influence the world market. It's too big, too powerful. And the dollar will settle on that day, and it may be that a dollar's worth, gold is worth $1,100, say. And that's the value of your dollar, fixed from then on in. And the way the gold standard had worked, and it worked for 250 years, 190 years in this country, is every day, as the gold commodity prices, if the price of the gold, commodity price of gold goes above the fixed price, then the banks very subtly, and this is what they did, if it goes above the interest rate, they'd slightly raise the interest rates to make money more valuable and bring gold back down again. If it went below the commodity trading price, they'd lower the interest rates to put out more money and bring gold up again. A group of bankers met in England for 250 years, they still do, now by conference call, every single day to determine the value of an ounce of gold. And if you remember when you were kids, you'd go into the bank, you'd see those charts on the wall with the interest rates, so they say 1.18 in the morning. You go the next day, it might say 1.14. It's a very poetic and a beautifully simplified device for determining the value of money. The Federal Reserve economists, and there's 30,000 of them, hate it because they want it to be really, really complicated. They want to put out complicated statistics that nobody understands. I want to make it uncomplicated. I want to make it as simple as possible, and I want to make it ours.
Mayor?
Yes.
Which of our elected leaders understand the concern right now we have the dollar versus gold?
All right, let me tell you exactly what my organization is doing. Myself on the road with Sue Ann setting up events, is traveling the country, building a grassroots activist organization to advance this cause. We have a gentleman who right now is working in Washington, D.C. His sole job is to meet with the candidates for president to educate them on this issue and with their staff. We have another 2 staffers whose sole job is to be on Capitol Hill lobbying Congress. That's why the Audit the Fed bill will move and will get elected. The next bill that we will introduce in February is called the Monetary Commission. The Monetary Commission is a bill that will establish a bipartisan commission of Congress, equal representatives of both, as well as representatives of the financial industry, who will examine and report to the country on how well Americans did before 1971 and since. We know what the results are. We know the statistics. The Fed doesn't want you to know those statistics. And those are the things we're doing. So, Ben Carson has already said he supports the gold standard. We know, look, you can guess where Rand Paul stands, but Rand Paul wants to be his own man. He's not going to talk a lot about this. He doesn't want to sound, he's got to be his own man, but he's great on this issue. And there are others are as well. But we spend quite a bit of time with them on this, and we're going to put a lot of work into making this happen. Again, I'm going to say this again, folks. To me, this is the single most important issue facing this country, short of ending the terrorist, other than ending the terrorist attacks.
We opened up with saying that the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer.
Yes.
And it seems to be a very big thing for voters.
Yes.
So how would you address the issue of wage disparity?
Well, that's exactly what's causing wage disparity. And see, here's the problem. It's not capitalism that's causing this widening income gap. It's monetary policy. It's the debasing of the dollars, the debasing of savers. If you're a multi-bazillionaire, you can see a corporation. This is too much back for you. Corporations don't need banks. Corporations can go right out and issue their own bonds. They don't need a bank. They issue these bonds and they go out and they buy other companies and they expand their value of their portfolios. But if you're a small business person, or you're you or me, right, then what you need to do is you need to go to a bank, and the bank isn't issuing credit. The widening income gap is being caused by the Federal Reserve System's failed monetary policy. There's no doubt about it, and unfortunately people don't understand that, and it's up to us to make them understand it.
Would you, at this point, invest your savings in buying gold or hope that
No, listen.
the gold standard
Can I-
because you lose a lot of money?
First of all, I'm not a financial analyst. All right? I'm not here to be a financial advisor. Gold to me is not an investment. It's a lump of thing that sits there and creates no income. You have to pay to store it. Do I want to have a few gold coins just in case? Sure. But I believe in American business. I believe that I, as somebody who saves money, should be able to lend my money to somebody who wants to build a company. I should get a fair rate of return on my savings. I can't get that today. So here, no, I am not here. Do you want to have, you know, a few of those Lady Liberty, Liberty coins? They're gorgeous. The United States government mints them at $20 face value, but they're going to cost you $1,200. That's an official coin of the American Mint. If you want to buy real gold American coins, which you can do, you buy them through a broker. They come from the mint. You pay the cost of an ounce of gold plus 3% to the broker, and you can stash them away in case something ever goes really wrong. But I'm not here to and by the way, securing the value of your currency to gold, which is the most precious commodity on earth, has been for over 3,000 years, only solidifies the value of your savings and our ability to trade. And there are a number, I don't want to say countless, but a significant number of passages in the Old Testament and the New Testament relating to money, the basing of currency, and gold. So I said earlier, from Copernicus to Isaac Newton to Adam Smith to Thomas Jefferson to James Madison to Steve Forbes to the Old Testament, they can't all be wrong. I mean, how often do we hear politicians saying, if we don't learn from history, we're doomed to repeat it? Well, then let's learn from history. It's all on our side.
Question I got, other precious metals, how would they compare to gold, or is it basically gold, like platinum?
You want to have a single international gold standard. In 1945, as World War II was coming to an end, there was a meeting held in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. It's a town, it's called the Bretton Woods Agreement. All of the countries of Europe, and this was in March, the war hadn't ended yet, but it was coming to a close. Because one of the first fatalities of war is the gold standard. If the government's going to print money out of thin air to fund wars, you can't have a gold standard. America never went off the gold standard during World War II. But France, Great Britain, all the European countries other than Switzerland did. They knew that coming off of the war, that there was going to be a problem with massive inflation and crashing currencies. So they met in Bretton Woods, 120 key countries, and that's when they determined that the United States dollar would be what's called the gold reserve currency, because it's the only money that had true value. They knew what it was worth. And that's when they determined how to peg the value of the European dollars to the American dollar. That's why we're the American Reserve is the American Reserve currency. Richard Nixon ended that agreement in 1971. And now you've seen this massive fluctuation in currency values. Do you know that every single day in this world today, well, every single day when the markets are open, there are stock markets around the world that trade trillions of dollars in assets. And there are currency trading. Stock market companies create value and jobs for people, right? Currency trading creates no value, no jobs for anybody. The amount of currency traded and currency speculative trading schemes around the world every day dwarfs the stock market trades. Dwarfs it. How many of you here are trading in currencies? I mean, what does that tell you? Ain't us.
For those on a budget, I remember I was in the Soviet Union in the early 90s, and carton of Marlboros, some blue jeans from Levi's, and a couple other things could pay for an awful lot. So it's amazing about perceived value. So, you know, I know I can't afford gold, but also, Steve, I just want to acknowledge, after all these years, I want to thank you personally for the service and the work that you do in our state. And I am so proud to be in the state with you.
Thank you, Ted. I'll just close. If there's any other question, thank you, Ted. I appreciate it.
You have one more.
Yes, go ahead.
How does George Soros in England, didn't he like just devalue everything?
Yeah. George Soros made his fortune on the backs of the British people, the British government, in a massive currency trading scheme back in, it goes back, I think, to the 70s, in which he basically ran down the value of their money. It's very complicated in the way he did it, but George Soros has made his fortunes off of currency speculation and currency trading.
So is he doing it here?
I'm sure he is. And look, the fact is that doesn't create jobs. Now, on the other hand, Soros has taken a lot of his savings and invested in building things like Dinosaur Barbecue. But let's face it, currency trading does not create jobs and value. Growing the economy, working hard savings, putting away the fruit of your labor, converting that into a fair return, that's the American dream. They've destroyed that. Folks, there are a number of outstanding books. I'd be glad to give them to you that you can read. Steve Forbes' new book is terrific. The best is Louis Lamon's book. You need to learn about this issue. Like Lenin said, you can debase the currency and not one man in a million will know it. You'll need to become one of those who know it if you really want to defend liberty. I hope you go to my website at fixthedollar.com, sign up for our email newsletter, and I look forward to working with you on this in the future, guys. Thank you.
I just wanted to let you know, if you fill out the email sign-up sheet that I handed out, we are going to do a drawing for a couple of books. So I'll go around and collect them, and then we'll pick a couple of names. Thank you.
Which book? Oh, good. Very good.
What a way to begin the year, huh, folks?
If any of you have any of those worthless treasury notes you want to donate to the association, I'm going to be coming around with the bucket.
Even better, if you have any gold coins, drop them in. So, while Steve's going to go around, always you folks are very generous. We're going to have Jimmy, we'll draw, we only have one book we're going to auction out tonight, and that's from me. And I wanted to be a little lighthearted tonight due to what happened in France, and just try to make everybody smile a little bit. So Jimmy, you got the tickets? Mayor, will you pick the winning ticket? Sure. Where is it? He's going to come up. There you go, sir. So I have here the Duck Commander Family Book, and winning number is 698. 698. Who? 698.
695.
No, not the winner, Dan. All right, do we have to do another number? Did you win, John? All right, we'll draw another number. Somebody's got to be 698. Joe?
699 is John. Who came in just for John? 697? 699? Come on, man. Who's got it?
Let's do another number, folks. Jimmy, come on up. Up. Denise? 698. Hey, that's great. A guess.
Sean, newcomer.
Yes, me.
All right. Awesome.
I didn't know you were drawing.
It's a book, the Duck Dynasty book. Here you go. You'll have a lot of laughs. Thank you, sir. Okay. Before we run out of time, just want to, next week will be a little bit, next month will be a little bit more business. We want to get some committees going. It's time we get some committees going. We have Neil here. Thanks, Neil. He's got a committee that, he already has a group of us who have joined it. So Neil, why don't you come on up and tell us about your committee? What I'd like is if anybody has any passion that they want to start a group, let's get it together. But Neil and I sat down together and this is our passion for this year. Neil?
Good evening.
Hey,
This
Neil.
ties in a little bit with Steve. You know, he was talking about money. I'm very concerned about the collapse of the dollar, and I've been doing a lot of research on it. And one of the things facing us that's very critical is the illegal immigration issue. As the Nobel Prize economic, what's his name? Milton Friedman stated, that immigration 100 years ago is different than now. The immigrants that came in, whether they were legal or illegal, either came with relatives or came and made it on their own. There was no safety net. Now they come and they have a full safety net. So today it's 5 billion, next month it's another 5 billion, next year it's 10 million, 100 million, you name it. Who's going to pay for it all? So we'd like to form a committee, the Immigration Committee, to formulate a mission, have a mission statement, an action plan. I hope part of the action plan to be meeting with our local Congress people, and then hopefully working through the local Congress people to meet with Boehner, who I also am disappointed that he is now also the leader again. So just see me, we'll sign you up, and we need to get a sane, common sense, legal immigration system. It's not that hard, it can be done. It has been done for years, and just see me.
John has something he'd like to address. John?
Time's up.
Yeah, Happy New Year, everybody, and thank you, Mr. Lonigan, for that inspiring talk today. Very good. Most of you know that at least when I come in here, at least half a dozen people every time that I come in here. I've been in this organization for a little bit over 2 years. It was shortly after I gave a presentation along with Dave Corsi on the fair tax. And almost every time I get half a dozen people saying, how's it going? And one of the things that I wanted to say is that this organization passed a resolution. The vote was 90% in favor of the resolution supporting, in other words, asking the state of New Jersey delegation to pass the fair tax. And at the December meeting, Marilyn came up to me and said, look, we got to do something. And she said, just tell me, give me a plan. So I emailed her something today, but I just wanted to kind of follow it up. In the last Congress, the 113th Congress, there were 85 co-sponsors for the fair tax, 76 in the Senate, in the House, and 9 in the Senate. The Freedom flat tax had 12. As far as I'm concerned, there is a fair tax movement, but there is really, as far as I can see, no flat tax movement. So I'm saying the thing that will change the way we collect money in this country will be the fair tax. Now, yesterday, Congressman Rob Woodall introduced the fair tax again. He got the largest number ever on the first day, 58 co-sponsors. Now, he'll have a lot more. He probably got a few more today. I haven't heard. The idea is that's what he's trying to do in Congress. What we want to do is grow the grassroots. In New Jersey, what we want to try to do, right now we have about 75 to 100 people that are fairly active with the fair tax. We want to grow that number to about 1,000. And the way we want to do that is to create membership. So one of the things I put on the table tonight was if you're interested in joining the fair tax movement. As I say, this group favors the fair tax 90%. If you'd like to talk about it with me, I'll be glad to talk about it anytime. We've been given a couple of presentations. If you would like to join the fair tax movement, it would be a $10 membership for a year. What do you get for that? Well, we're going to try to get each one that is a member, get to you one way or the other. We'll get you a bumper sticker. You'll also get the weekly fair tax newsletter by way of email. And what we'd like to do is say, I'd like to leave it at that and say, if you're interested, you can use the form. If you'd like to think about it and mail it in yourself, everything, all the information is on there. And if you want to talk to me before I leave here tonight, I'd be glad to talk to you about it. I think this is the year we have to convince the presidential candidates that let's not just say tax reform, let's do something about it. And if we can do that this year, we feel that the national consumption tax, the fair tax, will be one of the issues that you can't help. You will decide how much tax you pay yourself. All right? It's the only bill in Congress that will virtually eliminate the IRS. I thank you very much.
Okay, Sue Ann has the two winners.
No, actually, I'm going to ask you to pick.
Oh, I don't have my glasses on.
That's
so
all right,
you're
I'll
gonna-
pick
okay.
already.
Sue.
See, Jason Biava.
Jason, all right.
And William Martin.
Bill Martin, all right. Come on up.
Can I just say something, folks? This is the best book on the gold standard you'll ever read by Louis Lehrman, founder of Rite Aid.
I enjoy it.
So please read it. Yeah, he also ran against Mario Cuomo for governor of New York. Very brilliant man.
Joellen,
Well-
can I get a picture of Steve up there at the microphone?
Absolutely. Again, and we want to give
Oh, well, that book was-
Mayor Lonigan a standing ovation,
Oh,
please.
Oh, that's great. I have to think this.
Will you sponsor Bless America? We always want to make that Bless America.
Thank you.
I'm sorry?
With the guys with their books.
Guys, come on up with your books. Bill and Jason, come on up with your books. And we're going to let Steve lead us into God Bless America. Bill Martin, come on up, Bill.
How you doing? Good, sir. Yeah. Good. It's a good book. What do you want me? Right on each side. Hold up your book. Make sure you see the book. Thanks.
Okay, I'm right here. Cool, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you. Ready? Ready, folks?
Yes.
God bless America, land that I love.
to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
Thank you.
Have a great month, and hopefully we'll see you at Steve's presentation on Black American history, and we'll see you at the next meeting. Thank you.